Alright, I just watched Jason X again. Jason X is, or Jason 10, X being the Roman numeral for 10. So, yeah, this is the 10th movie in the franchise. Uh, we got uh, Jason returning. So, the timeline of this one is a little confusing. Um, Basically, we start out with Jason being held in a laboratory at Camp Crystal Lake. There's a Camp Crystal Lake laboratory or whatever. Um, this movie did come out before Freddy vs. Jason, but Freddy vs. Jason, logically speaking, has to be a prequel to this one. It has to take place in between uh, uh, for in between Freddy's or sorry in between uh, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, and Jason X. Freddy vs. Jason logically has to take place in between these two movies. The last one that I reviewed in this one, but this one came out first. It is set in the future basically. But anyway, when we open up, we're not told what year it is, but um, there's this uh, laboratory, and they've got Jason trapped there. I guess they managed to trap him sometime after the events of Freddy vs. Jason. Although that movie hadn't come out yet, so in this movie's timeline, it's just sometime after the events of um, Jason Goes to Hell, which indicates that Jason somehow got out of hell. Of course, once we take the Freddy vs. Jason movie into account, we know Jason got out of hell because of Freddy. Somehow Freddy was able to raise him from the dead. Uh, so, um, but anyway, Jason has been captured. They're running tests on him or whatever, and the plan is to cryogenically freeze him. Apparently, they've tried to kill him; it's been unsuccessful, and they're going to cryogenically freeze him instead. But before they can carry out this plan, um, some people show up, like with the military or something. They're going to move Jason and take him somewhere else to study his tissue and how he regenerates and whatnot. Of course, Jason escapes and starts to kill everybody, but in the process, he does get kind of tricked into going into the cryogenic chamber and gets frozen. Later, you see a group of people. Now, by this time, Earth has been abandoned. They live in all humans who survive live in a place called Earth 2, another planet that they have to travel to, which they've called Earth number 2. And but anyway, these people show up wearing protective suits or whatever. What doesn't make sense is they have an android with them, a character who's later revealed to be an android, and she's wearing the same protective suits, including a like breathing apparatus thing, or whatever that the rest of them are wearing. Doesn't really make any sense because she's supposed to be just as human, or she's supposed to be a robot, a cyborg, or whatever. So she's not human like the rest of them. So she shouldn't need all that special equipment or whatever the rest of them are wearing. She could just be wearing her normal clothes that she normally wears. But anyway, they come to this thing. She states that the cryogenic chamber that Jason is frozen in was manufactured in 2010. I don't exactly know how she knows that, but does she mean it was invented in 2010, or is she actually stating it was manufactured in 2010? Either way, she's supposed to be a robot. She's supposed to be accurate with these things. Maybe in the future the term manufactured and invented are used interchangeably or whatever. She means that that's when they were first manufactured, after they were invented. The first ones to come off the assembly line were in 2010. But then she later calculates that the bodies have been frozen for 4.55 centuries. Well, 4.55 centuries is 455 years. And then later, when they Jason, they don't plan on reanimating. He reanimates on his own, but they reanimate this other woman who was frozen as well. And when she reanimates, they tell her that the year is 2455. So if they had been frozen for 4.55 centuries, which is again later also confirmed by another character in the movie who says that she had been frozen for 455 years, that would mean that they were frozen in the year 2000. That doesn't make sense. If the chamber used to freeze them wasn't manufactured until the year 2010, not unless you got some funky time travel stuff going on, which there's no hint of that. So there's a mistake there somewhere. Either that cryogenic freezing chamber was manufactured and invented before 2010. It existed before 2010, and they were frozen in the year 2000. So it existed from at least that point, or they weren't frozen in the year 2000, and the calculation of the robot was off, that they had been frozen for 4.55 centuries, and the other character was just going off what the robot said and believed that they had been frozen for 455 years just based off what the robot said. But later in the movie, she says, the lady that they unfroze, who worked at the facility there in Camp Crystal Lake, says that they tried to kill Jason several times at the facility, starting in the year 2008. They tried to kill him the first time. So that would more line up that they had Jason captured and stuff since the year 2008. That would probably be after the events of Freddy versus Jason, which, according to some people who have calculated kind of the movie timeline, probably takes place in 2003 or 2004, somewhere around there. So it would make sense they've had Jason since at least 2008. They tried to kill him. It didn't work. And they thought that the only solution would be to have him cryogenically frozen. So she confirms that, and she was told by them in the year 2455, and she claims that in 2008 they've been trying to kill him since then. So that would make sense if she had been, they had been trying to kill him since 2008. In 2010, the cryogenic chamber was created and manufactured, and they wanted to use that new technology. So they've probably been frozen in there since, in the cryogenic chamber since about 2010, shortly after the chamber itself was manufactured. So, um, that makes more sense that she would know what year it was when she tried to kill Jason, and when she got frozen and everything, and when the chamber was manufactured. And I don't know how the robot came up with that date for manufacture. Was there a label on it that the robot read saying it was manufactured in 2010? So the 2010 or shortly thereafter date seems to make a lot more sense. The 2000 date doesn't make sense. We can just assume that the robot's calculation of how long they had been frozen was inaccurate. It's interesting that the robot cyborg character didn't realize the contradiction there. How can they be frozen in a chamber since the year 2000 if the chamber itself wasn't manufactured until the year 2010? But anyway, yeah, so since this movie takes place in 2455, or the main part of it after the opening scene takes place in 2455, the first opening scene takes place in maybe 2010-ish, right around there. Freddy versus Jason is obviously like removed. One more thing about the timeline. When they do wake the character up and tell her that it's the year 2455, she states that she's been asleep for over 400 years. And that would line up with the 2010 date to have the opening scene in the year 2010 or shortly thereafter. So that seems to make more sense. The opening scene is in 2010, not 2000. Alright, enough about the nerdy timeline stuff. Yeah. This movie is just, it's just weird, bonkers. It's having fun with the concept. They know people come to these movies, the Friday the 13th Part 10, or whatever. People know the first 9 movies. They come to see the kills. They come to see Jason wreak havoc. I think they probably got a lot of negative feedback after Part 9. The reason I say they probably got some negative feedback is because they kind of abandoned the concept from Jason Goes to Hell and decided to go with a more traditional movie. Yeah, they changed the setting up a lot, where it's now taking place on board a spaceship in the middle of outer space. But it returns to the traditional Jason. Jason is not a weird slug-like creature or weird demon thing that can transfer from body to body. Jason is now just back to regular Jason again. I mean, towards the end of the movie, he does get blown to smithereens and gets rebuilt by nanobots, and comes back as Uber Jason. But he's still basically Jason. He's back to wearing the mask. He's not hopping from body to body. He's Jason, he's just now rebuilt with, technology and stuff. He's like the when he becomes Uber Jason, he's like the $6 million man version of Jason, the bionic Jason. Yeah. I enjoy this movie. Are some of the special effects kind of bad? Yes. Does it bother me? No, not really. It's taking place in the future aboard a spaceship. It's early 2000s special effects. It is what it is. I I think it's a fun movie. Um, I I have fun with this movie. It's Jason killing people. He's not on a campground near Lakeside anymore. Now he's on board a spaceship, and they get to play around with things like holographic images and stuff, where they use kind of like the holodeck on the Star Trek TV shows, where they can create any sort of environment on the holodeck. And they can do the same thing here in Jason X. They have the holographic materials, so they can um, they play around a little bit with that in this movie, so they kind of bring in that science fiction element, which you would expect them to bring in some science fiction elements in a movie set 400 years in the future. Um, Over 400 years in the future. Yeah, I just really have fun with this movie. The timeline thing bothers me that they couldn't be more consistent with that, especially since the best way to make sense of it is to say that the um, robot character got it wrong. You'd think the robot would be more precise, uh, but yeah. Um, Other than that, I don't have any major complaints about this movie. I think this movie is really fun. Of course, you got the Space Marines, and you got the security on board the spaceship that try to fight Jason and get picked off one by one. You got the fight between Jason and a superpowered robot. Um, and you got Jason killing the people on board. They're even supposed to be teenagers, and you got a professor in his high school class, um, or high school, early college, high school. I don't know what they're supposed to be, but he's supposed to be taking them on this trip. They're supposed to be learning from this trip or whatever. Okay. Um, there's kind of a ridiculous scene in this movie where they're going to land at a space station, but Jason kills the pilot of the ship, and um, he, because of that, they don't dock at the space station docking bay. Instead, they kind of ram into the space station, and the space station completely blows up. It destroys it while causing only, I would say, a bit of a minimal amount of damage to the spaceship. Like, the spaceship itself does end up, it is damaged, and it does end up like causing problems for the people in the movie later on in the movie, that the spaceship itself is damaged. But like, the amount of um, damage that it takes uh, is relatively minor compared to the space station itself. That one ship is able to blow up the entire space station just by running into it. Like, the the um, the spaceship itself must be made out of a much stronger material than the space station was made out of. Whatever that ship is made out of, they need to make the space station out of that same material next time, because the space station was able to survive, um, or the spaceship was able to survive the space station fairly easily. And that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You would think they would make both out of really strong materials, and that and you would think that the space station, which I'm sure has docked ships plenty of times, is probably capable of docking multiple ships at the same time, um, would be stronger than the ships themselves, but apparently not. Um, so that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. Logically, the space station is destroyed and the ship is pretty much fine. Another thing is the body count in this movie. Oh my goodness. Um, it's stated that there's 60 soldiers on board the space station that can take care that that they'll fight Jason when they land at the space station in order to save the people on board the ship. But of course, the space station ends up blowing up. But if that thing housed 60 soldiers, and assuming not everyone who was on the space station was a soldier, there was probably a minimum of 100 people on board that or on that space station, because that would be just 40 other people besides the soldiers themselves, and that seems unlikely. It seems like there would have been more. I wouldn't be surprised. 60 soldiers. I wouldn't be surprised if there's 300 people total on board that space station, and Jason is responsible for basically responsible for the death of everyone on board the space station. That means this movie has a body count, I would say, of at least 100 just from that one scene alone. I mean, 300, like I said. Logically speaking, if they got 60 soldiers on board, again, even if you only count the minimum of 60, this movie has to have the highest body count. If you count all those 60 deaths aboard the space station, it's got to have the highest body count of any movie. And Jason doesn't kill them directly, but he's responsible for the deaths. So that's pretty crazy. um, um, yeah, pretty crazy. At least 60 people on board that space station. And that Jason causes their death by killing the pilot of the ship. So, yeah, that's I just think if you're watching this movie, watch it for fun. If you think it's ridiculous that Jason goes to space and you hate the movie for that reason, fine. I guess that's your opinion. You don't like it set in space. You don't like it taking place way in the future. That's your opinion. I personally think that the movie is fun. So, I have fun with it. Who cares if it's a different setting? Jason is just being Jason. Jason is killing people, and that's what counts. Oh, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the commander of the Space Marines, that character in the movie. He is a pretty cool guy. I really like him. And he is one of the most badass characters. He just fights all the way until the end of the movie, and he's pretty cool. All right. Those are my thoughts on Jason X. And yeah. Please like, share, and subscribe. And we're getting through these Friday the 13th movies, and eventually it's going to lead up to a franchise ranking once I've reviewed every movie in the franchise. Alright, God bless everybody. Dragonfire out.